Hello class and welcome to this week's demo. We'll be covering user and group management. I did go through your week 2, week 3 assignments and I did notice that some of you were already using sudo. And in your reflections discussion, some of you had questions, right, about what sudo was for and why do you need it. So the way I designed the first lab assignments, you wouldn't need sudo. So as we saw in the slides, I can run who am I, and that's going to show me my current user, my current username, which is the default VBox user. Should be the same for most of us unless you changed it during the setup of your VM. Now, if I print out my working directory, could do that with the tilde symbol. Notice that's home/VBox user. So any commands I do with /home/VBox user, I should be able to execute without sudo. So that could be an ls, that can be a make directory /home/VBox user. Maybe I want to make, let's say a keys folder or something. I should be able to execute all those commands without sudo. Because sudo is only when you need to, kind of break through the permissions, do elevated commands and operations, such as adding users and groups. You need system level privileges in order to make modifications to who are the users on the system or who are the groups. So for those first assignments, you shouldn't need sudo. For these though, for this week's assignment, you definitely will need sudo. As you saw in the slides, we threw sudo in front of pretty much every command because we're doing higher privilege operations. When you're adding users, adding groups, you need special privileges, so you need sudo. And as remember, sudo is a way of plugging into those root privileges. So that's how you access those higher privileges in a more secure way, right? You usually don't want to run as root user. You don't want to give regular users root access, right? Sudo is kind of the safer way of doing it. It's like putting on gloves, right, before doing some dangerous operations. That's kind of what sudo is. All right, so if we're going to put on these sudo gloves, right, in order to perform these operations, we do need to add ourselves to the sudo group. So there is a group of sudoers that we need to add ourselves to in order to perform those operations. Now we're kind of in a pickle, right? We can't do sudo stuff unless we're in the sudo group. So it's kind of like a chicken egg situation, right? How can we add ourselves to the sudoers without being a sudoer? So the way we're going to do that is we're going to log in as a root user. It is going to require a password, and the password we use should work because it's the password you use to set up your VM. So if I typed in change me, right, the default password for VBox user, that will give me access to the root user. And as you can see, it looks a little different. It says root in front instead of VBox user. And I'm still in my current VM, right? But instead of having the $sign, it's going to have the hashtag now. So now I have full control of the system. Pretty dangerous, right? I can delete entire directories. I can delete groups, delete users. I have pretty much the power to do whatever I want. But in this case, we're only doing it because we're not already a sudoer. We're going to go ahead and add ourselves to the sudo group. So we're going to use the user mod, which is how we modify our users groups. We're going to use the AG flag to add ourselves to the group without destroying our access to any other groups. This is usually the popular, the most practical way to add yourself to a group because you don't want to mess up the groups you're already in. So we're going to put sudo. That's the name of the sudoers group. And then we're going to do VBox user. I tabbed into VBox user, did a little autocomplete. And now if I hit enter, I'll add myself to the sudoers. If your who am I was a different username, then you're going to type in that different username instead of VBox user. Remember, VBox user is just my current username. It might be different for your particular VM. So yeah, that's it. Now I am in the sudoers group. You can exit the root access by hitting the exit command. Should be back as a regular user. I did notice at least one person was running commands for lab 2 and 3 as a root user. You don't have to be a root user. You can definitely successfully complete the labs as root user. But now that we know how things work, we should definitely not be using root user. So I'm gonna definitely be letting y'all know if I see that in any of the labs. You won't lose points, but I'm gonna strongly recommend that you don't run as root, because typically you wouldn't do that in a business professional environment. You'd have those limited privileges. All right, so there is one more step. We do need to reboot our computer, our VM. So the way you can do that, you can do that from the VirtualBox interface here. So you can right click on your VM and do reset, or if you're already on your VM, you can always just go to machine and then hit reset. So machine is in that top toolbar. So I'm going to go ahead and reset because my changes aren't going to become active until I do this. We'll give that a second to start back up.